The Ousmane Dembélé story. A theater in Paris. On the evening of September 22-25, the gilded interior of the Théâtre du Châtelet filled with the kind of hush that precedes history. Ousmane Dembélé sat in the front rows, 32 years in doubt compressed into his features, waiting to hear whether the name readout would be his own when Ronaldinho, of all people, stepped forward to hand him football's most coveted individual prize. Dembélé did not celebrate so much as dissolve. He thanked his mother. He thanked the club Barcelona that had once been ready to give up on him, and a former teammate, Lionel Messi, whose brilliance, he said, had taught him almost everything. It was an improbable scene for a player who, for the better part of a decade, had been football's most talented cautionary tale, a winger so explosive that scouts ran out of superlatives, and so frequently injured, became a running joke about hamstrings and wasted potential. To understand how Ousmane Dembélé ended up crying on a Parisian stage with the Ballon d'Or in his hands, you have to go back to a modest town in Normandy, and to a kid who was, by his own admission, always in a hurry. Vernon Evriks, and a boy who wouldn't stop running. Dembélé was born on May 5, 1997 in Vernon, a small town on the scene, roughly an hour from Paris, to a Senegalese Mauritanian father and Malian mother. Football found him early. He bounced through local clubs and Evriks before Rennes, sensing something rare, brought him into their academy as a young teenager. Even then, the raw material was obvious. A low center of gravitas, a first touch that seemed to bend the ball to his will, and a change of pace that defenders described less as speed than as a kind of disappearing act. He was fast-tracked. By 2015, he had broken into Rennes first team, and it took him barely a season to make the rest of French football sit up. In 2015-16, still a teenager, Dembélé scored 12 goals and terrorized Ligue 1 fullbacks with a directness that almost unfair. He didn't so much beat opponents as erase them. He was named the league's Young Player of the Year, and by the summer of 2016, one of Europe's most storied academies of talent spotting, Borussia Dortmund, had seen enough. They paid roughly $15 million for a player most of Europe had barely heard of. Ousmane Dembélé's story. Nobody outside German football circles was prepared for what Dembélé did next. Deployed as a winger in Thomas Tuchel's fluid vertical Dortmund side, he became close to unplayable for long stretches of the 26-16 season, pairing with a young Amola Lookman and a rampaging Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. He scored the winner in the DFB Pokal semi-final against Bayern Munich, then struck again in the final against Eintracht Frankfurt, earning man of the match honors as Dortmund the trophy. He was named the Bundesliga's Rookie of the Season. Within a single year, he had gone from a name unknown outside Brittany to one of the most coveted teenagers on the planet. That June, he made his senior debut for France, scoring in a friendly win over England. A World Cup summer was approaching, and so, inevitably, was a transfer that would change the entire arc of his career. In August 2017, weeks after Neymar's world record departure to Paris Saint-Germain had blown a hole in Barcelona's forward line, the Catalan club turned to the 20-year-old Frenchman as their answer. The fee was reported at around $5 million. He wanted $50 million, a staggering sum for a player with one full season of top level behind him. He was handed the number 11 Neymar's old shirt and a 5-year contract with a buyout clause set at $400 million. The expectation, unspoken but crushing, was that he would replace a global superstar. It went wrong almost immediately. Weeks into his Barcelona career, in just his first La Liga start for the club, Dembélé suffered a hamstring injury serious enough to keep him out for 4 months. It was, in hindsight, the opening note of a theme that would define his 6 years at Camp Nou. Dazzling, occasionally match-winning performances, interrupted again and by his body breaking down. Hamstring tears, thighs a serious knee injury that cost him the better part of a season. By some counts, Dembele missed more than one Barcelona to injuries, an almost unfathomable toll for a player still in his physical prime. The injuries were compounded in the early years by off-field frustrations, reported lateness, a perceived lack of professionalism that irritated senior figures at the club, and by a Camp Nou crowd that grew audibly restless whenever he pulled up holding the back of his leg. He became, fairly or not, a symbol of Barcelona's post-Neymar drift. A player who was supposed to be the club's next superstar and instead became a running argument about wasted money. And yet the talent never actually left him. There were nights, a hat-trick against Real Betis, a stunning solo goal here, a match-turning cameo there that reminded everyone why Barcelona had paid what they paid. He won 2 La Liga titles in his first 2 seasons, part of a Barcelona side still built around Messi's genius. He was part of the France squad that won the 2018 World Cup in Russia, a World Cup winner before his 21st birthday, and a change of role was largely a bench, one behind Kylian Mbappé and Antoine Griezmann. The long rebuild, the turning point, when it finally came, arrived not with a moment of magic, but with a change of coach of role. Under Xavi Hernandez, who took over at Barcelona in late 21, Dembele was gradually rebuilt, physically through a more careful continuous program and tactically, persistently repositioned as a provider rather than a pure finisher. The chaotic dribbler of his early 20s matured into a more clinical, creative force. In the 2022-23 season, his healthiest and most productive Barcelona campaign, he provided more assists in La Liga and helped fire Barcelona the first in 4 years. He also earned a World Cup in Qatar, started for France as they reached the final, where Argentina beat them on greatest finals in the tournament's history. It was proof that, not entirely, he had become indispensable to Didier Deschamps' France, even if the individual moments of brilliance that defined his club career at Dortmund had never quite translated to the same electricity in blue. By the summer of 2023 was in its final year. The club's finances were in disarray, and a homecoming of sorts to French football beckoned. Paris, Reinvention. Paris Saint-Germain signed Dembele in August 2023 for a modest fee of around 50 million, a discount by the standards of his talent that reflect in both his contract situation and lingering doubts about his durability. Few could have predicted what followed. Under Luis Enrique, the Spanish coach who took over at PSG in the same window, Dembele underwent the most significant transformation of his career. Not physical this time, but positional and psychological. Luikished him inward, away from the touchline he had haunted his whole career, into a false nine all-action central role that relentless pressing as much as it demanded dribbling. It was, on paper, a strange fit for a player long defined by his explosiveness out wide. In practice, it turned him into the focal point of the most dominant club side in Europe. The 2024-25 season became the validation of everything Barcelona had hoped for and never quite received. Dembele finished the campaign with 35 goals and 4 assists in 53 matches, winning 1 Golden Boot and being named UEFA's Champions League Player of the Season after a European run that culminated in a 50 demolition of Inter Milan in the final. PSG's first ever ever Champions League title. Along the way, PSG swept Ligue 1, the Coupe de France, the Trophée des Champions, and the UEFA Super Cup, a clean sweep of available trophies that French football nicknamed the Poker. Dembele, the club's talismanic number 10, had gone from Barcelona's expensive disappointment to the most decisive player in Europe, the Ballon d'Or. That season made the 2025 Ballon d'Or race, on paper, a two-horse contest between Dembele and Barcelona's teenage sensei Lamine Yamal. When his name was announced at the Théâtre du Châtelet, Dembele became the first PSG player to win the award since Messi in 2021, and the first Frenchman ever to win it in Paris colors. It was a strange, whispered about as a cart's own voters, its very best. It was a strange, moving kind of vindication. The same player once whispered about as a cautionary tale for young talents, too fragile, too undisciplined, a symbol of Barcelona's excess. Too fragile, too undisciplined, a symbol of Barcelona's excess, was now, by the consensus of the sport's own voters, its very best. No peace for the wicked. If football has a sense of irony, it saves some for the season that followed. The 2025-20 campaign, the hamstring strain in September, a thigh injury that kept him out for 6 weeks. A calf issue in November, another in February that forced him to miss league fixtures and threatened his availability for PSG's Champions League run. Reports in the French press suggested tension over a new contract. With PSG reportedly proposing a deal that traded a lower base salary for performance bonuses, an arrangement that, however commercially sensible, sat awkwardly against his new status as the best player on the planet. The frustration peaked almost cinematically 13 days before the 26th Champions League final. In PSG's final League 1 match of Paris Derby against Paris FC, Dembele lasted less than half an hour before limping off with cough discomfort. Sendin Ricky downplayed it as fatigue rather than injury. PSG called it precautionary. Either way, it meant 2 tense weeks of scans and rehabilitation, standing between Dembele and a place in the biggest game of the club season, with a World Cup summer also hanging in the balance. Budapest, again. He made it. On May 30, 2026 at the Puskás Arena in Budapest, PSG faced Arsenal in the Champions League final, defending the title they won so emphatically a year earlier. It was a far tighter, more anxious affair than the inner final had been. Kai Havertz put Arsenal ahead inside 6 minutes, and for long stretches, PSG probed without reward against a compact, resolute Arsenal defense, making its first Champions League final a club's talisman. The player whose fitness had been front-page news 2 weeks earlier stepped up and sent David Raya the wrong way. The score stayed level through 90 minutes in extra time, and the final was decided on penalties, with Gabriel Magalhaes' decisive miss sealing a 4-3 shootout win. PSG became back-to-back Europe champions. Only the second was someone in the moments that mattered most. He had become someone his team could rely on. Kai Havertz put Arsenal ahead inside 6 minutes. And for long stretches, PSG probed without reward against a compact, resolute Arsenal defense, making its first Champions League final appearance in 20 years. The breakthrough when it came fell to Dembele. Fold inside the box. Kvitcha Gerrits Kylian won a penalty just after the hour mark. And Dembele, the Ballon d'Or holder, the club's talisman, the player whose fitness had been front page news 2 weeks earlier, stepped up and sent David Raya the wrong way. The score stayed level through 90 minutes in extra time, and the final was decided on penalties, with Gabriel Magalhaes' decisive miss sealing a 4-3 shootout win. PSG became back-to-back European champions. Only the second club this century to retain the trophy, and the first French club ever to do so in successive seasons. For Dembele personally, it was another disappointed and increasingly hard to dismiss argument. Whatever chaos surrounded him off the pitch, on it, in the moments that mattered most, he had become someone his team could rely on. Summer in America, barely 2 weeks after Budapest, Dembele was back on international duty as France opened their 2026 World Cup campaign. Across the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the first 48-team edition of the tournament. And Didier Deschamps, last as national coach, it did not begin smoothly. France's opener, a narrow win over Senegal, saw Dembele subdued and imprecise. The same old questions about his end product resurfacing in the French press, even as Kylian Mbappe and Michael Lyons caught fire around him. Then, against Iraq, something shifted. Dembele set up Mbappe with an unselfish square ball before scoring himself a rasping finish that seemed to release something in him. Him was, by his own admission, a relief to finally get off the mark on the sport's biggest stage. Years of quiet frustration with his international scoring record. Whatever had been locked, it did not stop there. In France, round a 32 tie against Norway, with several of Erling Haaland's teammates rested. Dembele of Erling's teammates rested. Dembele reduced the hat-tricks at the first half. His 3 goals arriving in rough an hour. The second fastest attack in men's World Cup history, behind a mark set in 1954. He followed it with further goals against Morocco in the quarterfinals, a match France 120 to reach the semi-finals for a third consecutive tournament. There, in Dallas, the run finally stalled. A European champion Spain side, marshaled by Rodri and inspired by Yamo, the teenager Dembele had beaten to the Ballon d'Or 9 months earlier. Outplayed France in midfield and 1-2 ending Les Blues hopes of a third World Cup title. In the third place play against England, an extraordinary end-to-end contest that finished 6-4. Dembele scored again in stoppage time as France came from 4 goals down, only for Jude Bellingham to settle it for England moments later. France finished the tournament 4th. Spain went on to beat Argentina in the final, completing a men's and women's World Cup double for the country. For Dembele, individually the tournament was something closer to a personal triumph. A scoring return that, for the first time in his international career, matched the outrageous talent everyone had always known he possessed. The long arc. There is a version of Ousmane Dembele's career that reads as tragedy. A generational talent unrepeatedly by a body that couldn't keep pace with his gifts. A They won 150 million transfer that never quite delivered on its promise at the club that made it. For years, that was the only version anyone told. For years, that was the only version anyone told. But footballs rarely end where you expect them to. The same player whose hamstrings became a punchline in Catalonia is now a Ballon d'Or winner, a 2-time Champions League champion, and after a World Cup hat-trick delivered at 29, a decade after he first burst into a Rennes shirt as a teenager, finally a genuine international goal-scoring threat as well. The injuries haven't disappeared, if any. The 25-26 season was proof they may never fully leave him. What has changed is the context around them. A coach who found the role that suited him, a club willing to be patient, and a player who, for all the setbacks, never stopped believing. The explosive kid from Vernon was still in there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to run.
The main arc only tells part of it. Underneath the trophies and the transfer fees is a stranger, funnier, more human story of fines and video games, of a freak injury that struck twice, of a dressing room row nobody outside the France camp was supposed to hear about, and of a nickname that has followed him since he was 20. These are the chapters that don't always make the highlight reels. Long before Dembouz or the Ballon d'Or winner, there was simply the mosquito. The nickname came from Samuel Umtiti, who faced a teenage Dembele while at Lyon, and later became his France teammate, and briefly his Barcelona colleague. Umtiti has said the name stuck partly because of Dembele's face, and partly because of how he moved with the ball, quick buzzing, impossible to swat away. Dembele himself has laughed off the label rather than resisted, and it followed him from the French national team into the Barcelona dressing room, where teammates used it as a term of genuine affection for a player they generally described as cheerful, easygoing, and incapable of holding a grudge. That good humor extended to his private life, which by his own team has always been almost definitely unglamorous. Rather than nightclubs or fine dining, colleagues and Spanish press reported that Dembele's preferred evening in Barcelona involved fast food, Netflix, and hours on a PlayStation controller. A domestic homebody existence that sat oddly alongside his reputation as football's most expensive problem child. It was an ordinary lifestyle that ironically became extraordinary news the moment it started colliding with the professional footballer's need to be up, alert, and on a training pitch by mid-morning. If there is a single image that defined Dembele's early Barcelona years in the public imagination, it isn't a dribble or a goal, it's a training ground gate and security staff trying to work out where he was. In December 2018, he was fined more than 100,000 after arriving 2 hours late to a session, having reportedly lost track of time playing video games the night before. Coach Ernesto Valverde even bowed it in public, admitted he'd been late himself as a player, and shrugged that these things happen. Teammates Gerard Piqué and Luis Suarez were less forgiving in the press, gently suggesting the young Frenchman needed to grow up.
For a player who would go on to become a World Cup hat-trick scorer, Dembele's first World Cup final was close to a nightmare. Starting for France against Argentina in Qatar, he was caught flat-footed by Angel Di Maria early on, conceding a penalty that Lionel Messi converted to put Argentina ahead. Di Maria added a second soon after, and by the 41st minute, Didier Deschamps had seen enough, substituting off both Dembele and Olivier Giroud at halftime. Watching from the studio, former England defender Gary Neville was blunt in his assessment, telling viewers the winger's position showed no awareness of a move Di Maria had been running for a decade, and that Dembele had, in his words, played like an experienced kid rather than a seasoned professional. France would mount one of the great comebacks in World Cup final history without him. Mbappe's hat trick dragging the game to penalties before Argentina prevailed were redemption, proof to his critics that whatever he produced for his club, the biggest stages seemed to shrink him. It would take 4 more years, another World Cup, and a very different version of himself to answer that charge. 16 matches, 0 goals. If Qatar was a bad night, Euro 2024 in Germany was a bad month. Dembele started France's opening games, but struggled to influence them, going scoreless and drawing criticism for wayward crossing and hesitant decision making the final third. Against Poland, he won a penalty, but otherwise misfired, prompting fans on social media to brand him the most frustrating player in the tournament. One particularly cut him post described him as a professional con artist, a phrase that spread quickly enough to become a minor talking point in French football media. Teammate Aurelien Chouameni came to his defense in the mix zone, insisting that a player of Dembele's gifts would inevitably have quiet spells but remained essential to the team structure. The Nadir arrived in the semi-final defeat to Spain, in which Dembele's crossing accuracy was measured at a threadbare 3 from 16 attempts. Match of the day pundit Alan said on air Dembele had been more wasteful than anyone else on the pitch, when France, at number forward, even more strikingly. Flamengo coach Jorge Offensive turned a phrase to describe Dembele's tournament performance in a social media rant, was forced to issue a public apology soon after. By the count of frustrated supporters, it stretched a wider statistic that dogged him for years. 16 major tournament appearances for France without a single goal, a number that made his eventual venture World Cup 2020 explosion, hat trick included, feel less like a breakthrough and more like a decade of pressure finally releasing at once. The Neymar money. There is a strange symmetry running through Dembele's transfer history that football fans have long enjoyed pointing out. In the summer of 2017, Neymar's world record $222 million moved from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain and left a hole in the Catalan attack. And much of the money Barcelona received, a 20-year-old Ousmane Dembélé, plucked from Borussia Dortmund for a fee that eventually won $40 million with add-ons. He inherited Neymar's old number 11 shirt, and whether fairly or not, years that compares to a player he was never quite built to replace. 6 years later, Dembélé retraced Neymar's exact route, this time under his own power rather than as a stand-in. Leaving Barcelona for Paris Saint-Germain, the very club departure had originally funded. The fee this time was a fraction of what Barcelona had paid for him. A release clause worth just $90 million by PSG in the final days before it doubled on August 1 of 23. It meant Barcelona having spent well over $100 million on Dembele, recoup barely a third of that outlay 6 years on. And a footnote that the Ballon fans watching PSG colors 2 years later found difficult not to revisit the getaway. The mechanics of Dembele's 2020 exit were almost as dramatic as the outcome. He had re-signed with the club in 20 fresh terms that included a release clause of just tight $50 million, low enough by modern super standards to function almost as an escape hatch, and it doubled $100 million the moment August began, when PSG came calling that summer. Informed by their new sporting project under incoming coach Luis Enrique, Dembele asked Barcelona to negotiate according to reporting at the time while the clock ticked down toward the deadline. PSG ultimately triggered what was described as a private version of the clause via formal letter after missing the public deadline by a matter of days, and the transfer was completed for $50 million, split evenly between the club and the player under Spanish football's clause payment rules. Dembele later explained his decision in blunt terms, saying only that conversations with PSG had convinced him previously intended to stay. He was equally direct in dismissing suggestions that his close friend, Kylian Mbappé, then still a PSG player, had lobbied him to come, insisting the pull had been the club and the country, not any one teammate. It was, in the end, a curiously quiet ending to 6 years that had rarely been quiet at all. No farewell tour, no emotional Camp Nou send-off, just a release clause, a letter, and a flight to Paris.
Two-footed enigma. Coach to spend a decade trying to put into words what makes Dembele difficult to defend. Thomas too, who managed him at 17 at Dortmund, once said he loved Dembele's dribbling, his fearlessness, his pace, and his ball control. Adding that he combined dribbling, passing, and space creation at an extraordinary level for his age. Years later, at Barcelona, Xavi went further, comparing his 1-1 ability directly to Neymar's. Arguably the highest compliment one dribbler can pay another. What makes the comparison technically apt is Dembele's rare, genuine two-footedness. Unlike most wide players who favor cutting onto a stronger foot, he has always been comfortable shooting, crossing and dribbling off either side, a trait that made him almost possible to show down the weak side defensively. It also made him tactically adaptable in a way few wingers are, equally functional on the left or right flank at Dortmund and Barcelona, then reunite entirely as a pressing Centros 9 at PSG under Luis Enrique. A positional overhaul that would have broken the game of a less technically gifted player. From Vernon to the world, Dembele's roots sit a world away from the Théâtre du Châtelet. Born in Vernon, a modest Normandy town on the Seine, to a father of Senegalese and Mauritanian heritage and a Malian mother. He grew up in Evres, a working class area west of Paris. Before Rennes Academy scouts spotted him at around 2 their youth setup. He turned down interest from Benfica and Red Bull Salzburg to sign his first professional forms with the Breton club, making his League One debut at just 17 and scoring his first senior goal 2 weeks later against Bordeaux. The knock on him for years was end product, dazzling in transit, wasteful in the final ball. What changed at PSG wasn't the dribbling, that was never in question, but the decision making around it, sharpened by a coach, willing to simplify his job and a body. Finally, given the chance to catch up with his feet, it's a fairly ordinary immigrant family footballing origin story. By the standards of the modern French national team, which has drawn heavily for a generation on players with roots across West and North Africa. What makes it worth returning to is the contrast it draws with everything that followed. The 9-figure transfer fees, the Camp Nou adherence, the Ballon to Central Paris. Even at the peak of his fame, colleagues and journalists who covered him for years describe a player who never fully assimilated into football's ecosystem. Happier at home with a controller in hand than at a red carpet event, a homebody who happened to become one of the most expensive footballers alive.
No account of Dembele's 2025 Ballon d'Or is complete without Lamine Yamal. The Barcelona teenager who finished as runner-up and against whom Dembele's entire case had to be argued. It was, in its way, a passing of one Barcelona narrative to another. Dembele, the club's flawed former number 11, up against Yamal, the academy's brightest new jewel, 16 years his junior. Dembele's numbers, 35 goals, a Champions League title, a League One Golden Boot, ultimately proved decisive over Yamal's own brilliant breakout season. But the margin was close enough that pundits to cross Europe spent weeks debating it. Weeks debating it. The two would meet again barely 10 months later on the far bigger stage of a World Cup semi-final. Yamal's Spain defeating Dembele's France 2-0 in Dallas to reach the final. It was a small symbolic reversal. The Ballon d'Or winner outplayed, on the day it mattered most, by the very rival he'd beaten to football as a transfer. On the day it mattered most, by the very rival he'd beaten individual's biggest prize, long before he quietly triggered a release clause to engineer his move from Barcelona to PSG. Dembele had already shown the football world exactly how far he was willing to go to force a transfer. In August 2010, with Barcelona chasing a replacement for Neymar in Dortmund, we never seen anything like it, refusing to sell at their years in the game. And defender Socrates Papastathopoulos complained that a player can't just do what he wants. Dembele, by his own admission after, complained that a player can't just do what he wants. He was suspended, fined, and publicly criticized by teammates and club legends alike. Dembele, by his own admission afterward, as the first chapter of a career-long pattern, rather than a one in that patience and pressure would eventually get him his move and patience. 6 years afterward, his exit from Barcelona followed a quieter but structurally similar script. A release clause deliberately negotiated low enough to function as a self-direct emergency exit. Activated the moment he decided he wanted out. Dembele has never fully apologized for either departure. Asked about Dortmund years later, he said simply that he'd have regretted not fighting for the move had it fallen through. A version of the same logic footballs and executives alike would notice that Reserve faced almost exactly when Paris Saint-Germain came calling in 2023. Munich, without scoring. For all the individual brilliance that defined Dembele's Ballon d'Or campaign, his most historically significant single match in the 2025 Champions League final at Munich's Allianz Arena did not feature his name on the score sheet. Instead, he functions the creative engine behind PSG's route, driving forward from the setup, Desiree Doué's open adjacent second goal, then splitting in defense from inside his own half with a pass that sent Kvaratskhelia clear to make it 4. Doué scored twice, Akrafakami and Kvaratskhelia added the others, and PSG delivered the most one-sided final in the competition's history. It was, in a strange way, the perfect distillation of what Luis Enrique's Reinvention had actually done to Dembele's game, not simply making him a goal scorer, but making him dispensable regardless of whether the ball ended up in the net off his own boot. After the match, Luis Enrique made his case publicly and directly, telling reporters that Dembele deserved the Ballon d'Or for what he had produced across the season, statistics that placed him among the very goal contributors in Europe's 5 biggest leagues, even without a Champions League final goal to his name. 4 months later, The voters agreed. The brother from another mother. Of all the relationships that have shaped Dembele's career, none has been as constant as his friendship with Kylian Mbappé. The two met as young teenagers coming through France's youth setup and have described knowing each other since they were 14, long before either had played a senior match. Even as their careers diverged sharply, Mbappé becoming French young star at PSG, while Dembele's Barcelona years dissolved into headlines, the bond reportedly never wavered. When Dembele suffered a serious thigh injury and Tony May posted my brother and urging him to stay strong. By the time the two were finally teammates at club level following Dembele's 23 move to Paris, associates of both players told French media that Dembele's easygoing, joke-cracking personality served as a kind of counterweight to the intense scrutiny that followed Mbappé everywhere. Mbappé, for his part, has been publicly generous about his friend's late blooming success, saying he personally believed in Dembele's ability even during the years when the wider football world had written him off and framing his eventual Ballon d'Or breakthrough as a natural if delayed arrival rather than a surprise. Even after Mbappé's own move to Real Madrid, the friendship has persisted through the France national team, with Mbappé naming Dembele among the players he is closest to in the entire squad. Football has a small, informal club of players who have managed to win the game's three biggest prizes: a World Cup with their country, the Champions League with their club, and the Ballon d'Or as individuals. It is an exclusive list, populated by names like Zinedine Zidane, Fabio Cannavaro, and Luka Modric, and by the summer of 2026, Ousmane Dembele's name belonged on it too. A World Cup winner in 2018, a two-time Champions League winner, with PSG in 2025 and 2026, and the reigning Ballon d'Or holder since September 2025. What makes Dembele's version of the trifecta unusual is the order and the timeline. Most players who complete the set do so with the individual prize arriving near the peak of an already decorated career. Dembele's Ballon d'Or as a relative half 2 years defined more by fitness reports than trophy counts. Then backed it up with a second Champions League title the following spring at an age, 29, when many wingers of his explosive, dribbling style are already in decline. It is a version of greatness assembled, entirely out of order, the individual crown arriving almost by surprise, in the middle of a run of collective success rather than as its capstone. Long before Kylian Mbappé became the standard against which every young French forward was measured, it was Dembele who briefly held that status. At Dortmund, coach Thomas Tuchel called him one of the most talented players in European football, and heading into the 2018 World Cup, the two teenagers, Dembele and Mbappé, traded public compliments with this unusually for competitors. Mbappé called Dembele the best young player in the world, and Dembele, laughing, insisted it was actually Mbappé who deserved the title, praising his goal-scoring dribbling and efficiency. Their paths from there diverged in a way that says as much about football's cruelty as it does about either player's talent. Mbappé's rise was almost frictionless, a World Cup, a Ballon d'Or short-lived fixture, a move to Real Madrid that felt like destiny fulfilled. Dembele's was in the better part of a decade, so thoroughly that by his mid-20s, wasted potential had become the default framing of his career in most football media. That both men would eventually stand among the very best players in the world at the same time. Mbappé at Real Madrid, Dembele freshly crowned Ballon d'Or winner at PSG, makes their teenage exchange of compliments read, in hindsight, less like a moment of youthful hype that simply took one of them far longer to fulfill. Dembele's valuation across his career, and you get an almost literal chart of his football fortunes. Barcelona paid Dortmund a reported 105 million, plus add-ons pushing the total 45 million. In 2017, one of the highest fees ever paid for a player at the time, based almost entirely on a single explosive Bundesliga season. Injuries and inconsistency spent the next 6 years quietly eroding that number in the market's estimation, to the point that by 2023, Bar effectively let him go for a release clause of just 20 million. A decline of roughly 2/3 from his original price. price, despite 2 Liga titles and a World Cup winner's medal along the way. A decline of roughly 2/3 from his original price, despite 2 La Liga titles and a World Cup winner's medal along the way. What happened next inverted the entire trajectory. By the time of his 2025 Ballon d'Or win, market trackers had Dembele's value back above a 100 million, more than double what PSG had paid for him barely 2 years earlier. A rare case of a footballer's valuation actually appreciating in his late 20s against the grain of an industry that typically prizes players a full decade younger. The reported terms of PSG suck Swinton contract offer, trading a lower guaranteed base salary for performance with bonuses, only underline the strange economics of it all. Even as the reigning best player on the planet, Dembele's next contract was still being shaped by a career-long question about whether his body could be trusted to deliver the signature goals. Certain goals recur in any honest account of Dembele's career, each a small monument to a different phase of it. There is the winner against Bayern Munich in a DFB Pokal semi-final, an assist and goal combination that announced him to German football as a teenager. There is the thunderbolt against Real Betis in November 2020, cutting inside from the right and lashing a shot into the top corner with his weaker foot. Still one of the cleanest strikes of his Barcelona career, even in a season otherwise defined by absence. There is the hat-trick of assistance against Athletic Bilbao in 2022. 3 chances created in a single half that made Xavi's public faith in him look prophetic. And there is, of course, Boston 22's 3 goals in barely half an hour against Norway at the World Cup, the second fastest hat-trick in the tournament's history, arriving at the exact moment his international career most needed it. None of these goals individually would define a lesser player's highlight reel. Taken together, they trace something else, a career built less on a single unforgettable moment than on flashes of scattered unevenly across 4 different clubs in 3 different countries, each one a reminder of exactly what all the fuss had always been about.
Eleven becomes 10. Shirt numbers carry a strange symbolic weight in football, and Dembele has worn 2 of the sport's most loaded digits. At Barcelona, he was handed the number 11, Neymar's old shirt, freshly vacated by the Brazilian's world record move to Paris. A jersey that arrived already carrying the unspoken expectation that its new owner would somehow replace what the club had lost. For 6 years, every time Dembele pulled it over his head, it was a small, wordless reminder of the comparison he could never quite escape. At PSG, he was given the number 10, the shirt most recently associated in the club's own history with the outgoing line on PSG's most creative attacking talents. With 11 at Barcelona had felt like an obligation, the 10 at PSG became something closer to a coronation. By the time that we lifted the Ballon d'Or in September 2025, he had become the shirt's new benchmark rather than its latest disappointment. The first PSG number 10 to win the award outright as a Parisian player. The view from Camp Nou now. Barcelona's relationship with Dembele did not end cleanly, and it has not aged simply. For years after his 23 departure, Catalan fans and media largely treated the transfer as a rare piece of good business, a flawed, injury-prone winger offloaded for a token fee. His Barcelona career remembered as an expensive experiment that never quite paid off. His first return with PSG, scoring in the 23-24 league quarterfinal, drew open scorn from sections of the Barcelona support who felt the celebration crossed the line for a former player. The 2025 Ballon d'Or ceremony complicated that story considerately, watching a player they had once been relieved to see leave collect the sport's big individual prize in a season built substantially on the reinvention Xavi had begun during Dembele's final Barcelona years. Forced to quieter, more uncomfortable reassessing in Catalonia, less about whether letting him go had been the right footballing decision at the time, and more about what it said that the raw material spent 6 years trying, failing to fully unlock, had needed only 2 seasons elsewhere under a different coach in a different role to become the best player alive. It is the kind of respirative regret that tends to follow genuinely great players who leave too early rather than too late. In Barcelona, for all the frustration of those Camp Nou years, now finds himself filed on that list too.